Welcome to Jerry Recaps. Today we will be continuing part 4 of this manhwa. The story continues. YuWon looked at his hands dazedly as he received the skill Master of Mana from the admin. Isn't this too much for a reward in the tutorial? Even though he killed a lackey, YuWon wasn't expecting a reward this great. He would have been satisfied with a rank skill or item. Mastery of Mana is an S+ rank skill, and it was one of the authorities of an administrator. It increases sensitivity and authority over mana. It was a brand new type of skill, but YuWon knew how to use these kinds of skills well. The skill might not be overpowered by itself, but it synergized well with any skill, boosting the user's abilities. Depending on their proficiency, the usefulness of their skills could be night and day. The authority of an administrator. Even YuWon has never heard of such a skill. Authority over mana, you say? Mana was everything in the tower. The power to control that mana, arcane power, was the biggest factor in deciding who the weak and the strong were. To rule over that mana. It was an ability fit to be called an authority. I probably can't use it properly yet. YuWon knew the extent of his own power. A blue sphere gathered on top of YuWon's palm. The sphere wasn't smooth. It continuously morphed irregularly. It was proof that he wasn't able to properly condense mana yet. It was a crude mana blast. An advanced mana manipulating skill. Mana blast was a technique that required at least 40 arcane power with advanced control over mana. A mana blast during the second tutorial. YuWon stared at the sphere in his palm. It wasn't able to maintain a proper form yet, but it was undoubtedly a mana blast. YuWon's arcane power stat was barely at 26. It took hunting the mother worm, getting 2 lucky random stats, and using all his unallocated stat points. Though unstable, YuWon was able to create a mana blast with only 26 arcane power. Part of it was YuWon having exceptional control over mana, but it still would have been impossible without the effects of Master of Mana. The unstable mana blast exploded. The power inside it blew apart like shrapnel, lightly damaging the ground around him. The mana blast had an amazing area effect. It would be helpful in dealing with numbers. He clenched his fist. This is pretty nice. Maybe I should be thankful to Olympus. YuWon had a higher goal than simply making it through the tutorial in one piece. He didn't want to climb the tower and become a ranker because he desired power or wealth. But it's still far from enough. I cannot be satisfied by regaining the previous strength that I had before going back in time. YuWon was full of determination. His eyes were blazing. When he received his reward from the administrator, there were approximately 14 hours left until the second tutorial was finalized. Outer gods were beings that perfectly fit the definition of omnipotent. Regaining his old powers was far from enough to fight them again. He needed far more cards to play against them than he had now. Far more. YuWon spent that entire time hunting. Earthworms infested more than just the subway station. They populated any underground space. So YuWon killed time by clearing out one basement after another. He didn't have a choice, since the only monsters in the second tutorial were earthworms. In the tutorial, the stronger your opponent is, the greater reward. So, logically, hunting monsters that were far weaker than him resulted in stunted growth. Thankfully, the second tutorial is close to being finalized. A whole day passed by while YuWon was underground, and it was nighttime once again. In the distance, he saw it. It was the safe zone that had stopped shrinking. Inside the circle, the people were split into 2 large groups. They were loudly arguing with each other about something. Near the end of the second tutorial, only 10 minutes remain until the second tutorial concludes. That's why I'm saying let's wait a bit longer. Hongdae became such a mess. Do you really think the government will do nothing about this? If we just wait one more day. You're in denial. Our world has changed. Not just Hongdae, but everywhere. How can you believe that? Didn't you hear the explanation up till now? Didn't you hear what sector this was? Do you really think this is the only place like this? Even if that's true, isn't the time almost over? Is there really any need for us to do this? This was the second one. Who's to say there won't be a third or even a fourth? Do you think the next one will somehow be safer? What if this safe zone suddenly disappears? Things could become so dangerous, we won't even be able to secure the rations that are over there. Myung-hoon kept arguing with another man. Stop talking already. We need to form the next resupply squad, now. Who are we sending? We're almost out of time. People were fighting, split into two main factions, people who had accepted this world versus the people who hadn't yet. It was the weak against the relatively strong. The people who accepted reality wanted to secure more rations for the safe zone. But they had to avoid the earthworms above ground to loot the restaurants and convenience stores in the area. Don't feel so down. We were all originally going to die, and now a lot of us can survive. That's not fair. Why can't we all survive together? Inside the zone, people continued to argue. Even among the factions, a few people had already grown close enough to form teams. The safe zone was crowded with people. There was only one reason why this situation was occurring. Too many people had survived. Look! Over there! A person? Someone from the crowd got startled as he looked in a direction. Is that a person over there? People started noticing YuWon in the distance. He was carrying a backpack, walking toward the safe zone. People were surprised that there was a person outside the safe zone, but they were also worried for him. YuWon became the center of attention. A few people with keen eyes spotted the danger and shouted at YuWon. Below you! Be careful! There was still one remaining earthworm. The ground below YuWon shifted. The earthworm shot out from the ground to take a bite out of YuWon. It charged towards YuWon in an instant with his big jaw wide open. However, YuWon had already hunted thousands of these bugs. Even if it was a surprise attack, it wasn't a difficult task for YuWon to crush the earthworm's head. Only thanks to having 33 strength, he didn't even have to use his knife to kill the earthworm. Nobody could look away from YuWon. Their eyes were wide open, they could not believe the scene that transpired in front of them. The people only stood there dazedly. Only 5 minutes remain until the second tutorial end. YuWon checked the remaining time before speaking. Just pretend like I don't exist. YuWon looked at the people in the distance and spoke. Myung-hoon's face turned sour. YuWon further said, continue with your meaningless discussions. Kim YuWon had already reached level 26, gaining stats like strength, magic, and constitution above 30. He had accumulated a total of 10,000 points. This was the result of 13 hours of hard work. After hitting level 21 by killing the mother worm, he ground 5 levels in 13 hours. When YuWon decided to go back above ground, he had one thought: when the timer ran out and the second tutorial ended, a bonus reward will be given to those inside the safe zone. YuWon wasn't certain, but it was entirely possible that those outside the safe zone could get disqualified from receiving the reward. YuWon slowly stepped into the safe zone. People whispered amongst themselves at the unbelievable sight. People's gazes switched focus from YuWon to the countless corpse chunks on the ground. If the earthworms were killable, could the thousands of people who were massacred outside the safe zone have lived instead? Hey YuWon! Someone approached YuWon. When YuWon turned his head towards the familiar voice, he saw Kim Myung-hoon making his way out of the crowd towards him. He knew from that instant that Myung-hoon had become the leader of the safe zone with his tyranny. Where did you go? I was looking for you. YuWon thought Myung-hoon must be pretty adept at acting. In front of all these people, he was able to act so friendly to an underclassman that he used to use as a punching bag until just yesterday. I was worried because you suddenly disappeared. Myung-hoon decided that showing off his friendship with YuWon to the crowd would be beneficial to him. Instead of replying to Myung-hoon, YuWon looked around his surroundings. The atmosphere was heavy. There was a mix of fear, wariness, and hope in the people's gazes. Paying no heed, YuWon walked toward the numbers engraved on the invisible wall at the center of the safe zone. The maximum capacity was 1,500 people. 1427 fell quite short of that number. Some of the people were carrying food rations and others were carrying weapons. Fear could be seen on their faces. Is that the resupply squad? YuWon looked over at the group of timid and anxious-looking people. They're people that were pushed to the outer zone, aren't they? All right, let's all go back in, Myung-hoon spoke. YuWon was quiet for some moment but then spoke up. The food that they have. YuWon asked, pointing to the food that people held in their hands, food that looked like it was looted from convenience stores and fast food restaurants. Did you guys leave the safe zone for it? We had no other choice. We didn't have a lot of food left, and the third and fourth tutorials will surely be harder than this, Myung-hoon replied. So what you're saying is that you guys need rations. YuWon was curious about the situation in the safe zone. So he kept inquiring. That's right. You guys aren't wrong. There were less than 3 minutes remaining for the second tutorial. The earlier commotion was probably people arguing about securing more rations before the second tutorial was finalized. There were people that were in the orange safe zone. People who almost died. Those were the people that had brought back rations for the group. So what, you guys were going to force them to go outside again? So they can bring back more food? Well, they're people that would have died anyway. Myung-hoon was right. They're people that should have died. However, the people that exiled them to their deaths once already had no right to be deciding the fate of these people. Since they should have died, do you want them to risk their lives to bring back food? YuWon said, staring Myung-hoon dead in the eyes. Myung-hoon started shaking after seeing YuWon's expression. YuWon wasn't doing anything other than staring at him, but Myung-hoon couldn't help but cower. This wasn't the same YuWon that he once knew. Do you still think this is the same comfy, cushy world that you lived in? A world with laws and morals. Myung-hoon gauged people's reactions after asking that question. He could see a handful of people nodding. It was partly because they agreed, but also because they were trying to justify their actions. It couldn't be helped since the world had changed. To survive, you had to sacrifice someone else. That thought process is how they ended up sending that small group of people outside of the safe zone. YuWon, in order to survive, you need to become a coward. Be cowardly, and be selfish. I'm giving you advice not as a Sunday, but as another human being. Myung-hoon avoided YuWon's gaze, but when he noticed his group standing nearby, it gave him back his courage. Looking at YuWon straight in the eyes, Kim Myung-hoon started talking. It seems that you still haven't adjusted yet. Adjusted? YuWon couldn't help but let out a laugh. To think he would hear this from a brat like Kim Myung-hoon of all people. The timer rounded up to 0, and the time for second tutorial ended. Finalizing the second tutorial. Distributing 500 points to all the participants in the safe zone. You have obtained an inventory pouch. Your inventory pouch will disappear upon dying. A small messenger bag fell on top of everyone's heads. YuWon picked up the bag before speaking. There are many ways to survive. I don't really want to interfere or give you any advice. But here's the thing. Don't cross the line. No matter what. YuWon didn't specify what that line was, but he didn't have a lot of time to just stand around and talk. As soon as he finished talking, YuWon looked away from Myung-hoon. Myung-hoon looked confused as to what YuWon meant. It was now time for everyone to focus on the contents of the next tutorial. The third tutorial will now begin. Watching YuWon vanish as soon as he had returned made Myung-hoon grind his teeth. That punk, acting all high and mighty. YuWon could already walk around freely outside the safe zone starting in the second tutorial. The outside was crawling with monsters, but he was perfectly safe by himself. The system notified you, please hunt the monsters in the sector and collect 50 essences. Different types of monsters started appearing everywhere in the sector, and this time it includes all types of them, bugs, zombies, and rats. The time limit for third tutorial is 72 hours. In the event that the limited amount of time is exceeded, the relevant sector will be destroyed. The gate to the next tutorial will be activated after 70 hours. In the middle of a street in the safe zone, a long, opaque tunnel appeared. There was a number on the tunnel. There was a number that appeared over the huge gate. It was the number of essences that the participants of the third tutorial had to collect. The opaque color meant that the gate hadn't been activated yet. Is that the tunnel? You could move on to the next tutorial sector after collecting 50 essences. That tunnel was the pathway that transferred you to the next tutorial sector. It was a pretty simple mission. Everyone who heard the tutorial's explanation had a similar thought. It's just like a video game. Hunt monsters and collect items. It's a quest that anyone who has played any amount of video games would have gotten at least once. However, the real world wasn't a video game. It wasn't quite as simple a thing to do. Over there. Zombies? Aren't those zombies? A few zombies could be seen in the middle of the street. People thought they had disappeared after the first tutorial. But it wasn't just zombies. Various other monsters started appearing. There were giant spiders, as well as pigs with sharp, spiky fur. There were even centipedes the size of a human arm crawling up the sides of buildings. The entire world had already become a dungeon. That's when someone shouted, noticing the ground, "The safe zone is still here." The people who cheered probably wouldn't survive much longer. The objective of the third tutorial wasn't surviving, but hunting. Myung-hoon thought to himself, so I need to defeat these guys and get essences or whatever? He looked around at the monsters outside. There were many different types this time. The third tutorial was unlike the previous two. You couldn't survive simply by running away. It was a mission where you had to gather 50 monster drops in order to survive. 50, you say? He assumed the bags were given to all the participants to use as a means to hold the essence. Myung-hoon kept looking back and forth between the bag and the monsters outside the safe zone. After making a realization, the corners of his lips perked up. You all heard it, right? Myung-hoon asked the people around him after wiping the smirk off his face. There were two types of people in the crowd. The first were people terrified of the fact that they had to fight monsters. The second were people who had built up the resolve to fight. I'm sure you all know what we have to do in order to survive. Myung-hoon raised his knife. Let's do this together. YuWon walked down into the subway station. YuWon turned the bag he was wearing upside down. The marbles that spilled out of the bag went inside the new inventory pouch he had obtained. There must have been over 100 of them. YuWon had a total of 132 essences, from which he only needed 50. Was it because the third tutorial had started? He could see the display for the number of marbles in his inventory pouch. YuWon threw away the bag that he kept to hold all his items and equipment. He hung his inventory pouch that the system granted on his hip and stored all his items in that pouch. At the start of the third tutorial, the inside of the subway station changed into a different dungeon. There were not only earthworms, but also zombies, moss spiders, and even subterranean snakes. All kinds of monsters gathered in the subway station to create the largest dungeon within the Hongdae sector. There really are a lot of them. I wonder if I can collect 1,000 of them. YuWon looked at the various monsters with sparkling eyes as he mumbled. Seeing the warm welcome, YuWon mumbled to himself, "Shall I try this again?" YuWon raised his hands. The mana in the environment started gathering over his palms. Was this perhaps a greeting for the first person to enter the dungeon? The monsters all rushed toward YuWon. 30 arcane power with 0.5% proficiency in Master of Mana. I'm lucky I obtained this much essence in the second tutorial. Mana essence was essential to passing the third tutorial. These items were obtainable from the earthworms in the second tutorial. That's why until the second tutorial ended, YuWon focused on collecting mana essence by hunting earthworms. YuWon's hunting speed was remarkably fast. In just a day, he far exceeded the necessary number of essence to pass the tutorial. He could make it through to the 4th tutorial without doing anything else, but YuWon had no intention of being satisfied with just 132 essences. Compared to his first try using Mana Blast, when he only had 4 more arcane powers and a sliver of additional skill proficiency, but the unstable orb of mana started slowly stabilizing. How long had he focused? You created a proper Mana Blast. Registering Mana Blast as a skill. Above YuWon's hands, a proper Mana Blast had formed. That should do it. The flow of mana stabilized. The orb made of mana was no longer shaking violently. Its registration as a skill meant that YuWon successfully created a full-fledged Mana Blast. The fist-sized Mana Blast howled violently, asking for its power to be unleashed. As he expected, he wasn't able to fully control it yet. YuWon aimed the palm of his hand toward the monsters that were getting closer. This should be enough. The Mana Blast shone brightly. A powerful beam of light shot out from YuWon's hand. The blast didn't cover that large of an area, but its firepower was nothing to sneeze at. I can't fully control it yet. YuWon felt the mana leaking out of him like a deflating balloon. The mana consumption for this skill was just too high. It took all of his mana to create a single Mana Blast. I need more arcane power and higher proficiency before it'll be usable. The stairway leading to the deeper parts of the station collapsed. The heads of monsters that were running towards YuWon were blown to pieces, and their scorched bodies littered the floor. When climbing the tower, Mana Blast was one of the most basic of essential techniques. All it required was gathering mana into a single point and releasing it. It was simple but highly destructive. Due to its simple nature, it was a technique that allowed one to measure the user's arcane power and ability to control mana. This technique really isn't my type. There were plenty of people that specialized in using Mana Blast, but despite being able to create one, YuWon seldom used Mana Blast in battle. 2 essences fell and rolled onto the floor. Not every monster dropped an essence. They dropped from perhaps every 1 into 10 monsters. It didn't have a very high drop rate. Taking that into account, YuWon had been pretty lucky up to this point, having already collected this much essence. YuWon picked up the essence from the ground and put it into his inventory pouch. The monsters were cautious of him. They stopped in their tracks, staring dazedly. "What is with you guys?" Then, observing that the monsters were cautious of him after seeing the power of the Mana Blast, he pulled out his knife. YuWon started walking down a flight of stairs. "Why are you so afraid of me?" The 3rd tutorial was all about hunting. 72 hours remained, and YuWon had no intention of wasting a single minute of it. 2 days had passed since the start of the 3rd tutorial. Only a day is remaining. The first tutorial might have killed the largest number of people, but proportionally, the 3rd tutorial ended up being far more lethal than the last 2. Aren't we too far in? Yeah. I have a bad feeling about this place. 3 people entered Hongdae Station. It was 1 woman and 2 men. There's nothing we can do about it. Hopefully, we can find a hiding place here. The green shirt sighed hearing his friends speak reality. The huge-built guy was Han Jun-ho, a level 10 player. The green shirt was Kang Seon, also a level 10. But was Hongdae Station always this large? Am I imagining it? Kang Seon spoke as he looked around to check his surroundings. Who knows? The entire world changed. Why would this place be an exception? The woman was named Juyeon. She was guarding the group's rear when she opened her mouth. Hey! Over there. Juyeon was also a level 10 player. What? What is it? A convenience store? The girl looked in a direction as she spoke excitedly. The group's faces lit up. They'd been concerned about their depleting rations, so the convenience store was like discovering an oasis in a desert. Let's go there. I was starting to feel hungry. There's probably ramen, right? There's no hot water. Why would you want ramen? Kang Seon spoke. I can just eat it raw. Let's go in already. I'm starving. While thinking about filling up their inventory pouch with rations, something fell on the head of the guy running ahead of the group. But to their surprise, there was a large spider. It was a large green spider. The man assaulted by the spider let out a painful cry before dropping dead. His head melted off, creating a puddle of poison and liquefied flesh. The boy and girl looked dazedly as their friend got killed by the huge spider. They were stunned with fear and could not react instantly. Junho! The boy let out his voice. The spider let out a horrifying cry. One by one, the monsters around the convenience store started revealing themselves. 1 zombie, 2 moss spiders, and 3 man-eating rats. In reaction to the gory sight, Ju-yeon raised her knife, and the other guy, Song-chan, prepared to swing his large hammer. Why are there so many? They'd already lost one of their companions. Can we kill them all? Ju-yeon's heart was pounding. During the last 2 days, the 3 of them had been through thick and thin. They had flirted with death multiple times, hunting the monsters outside. They even leveled up quite a bit. All 3 of them were above level 10, meaning they possessed far greater stats than before. However, it was uncertain if the 2 of them could face off against all these monsters. There wasn't a lot of time to think. The 3 man-eating rats jumped towards them. Man-eating rats were the size of German shepherds, and they were the most nimble among the monsters that inhabited the subway station. Ju-yeon swung her knife at the man-eating rat charging towards her. It was a knife she had bought from the lackey for 200 points. The knife was unable to cut the rat. Unlike sluggish zombies, the man-eating rats were easily dodging her attacks. It was the same story with the moss spiders that melted their companion's head with poison. They crawled at her at a breakneck pace, getting up in her face. Get away! She tried to call for Song-chan but to no avail. Ju-yeon tried to push the man-eating rats away from her. Though she got bit by one of them, she successfully managed to get one of the man-eating rats. Meanwhile, Song-chan, who was busy facing off against 2 moss spiders, suddenly faced a zombie and tried to evade its attack by hitting it. But the zombie's skin was really tough that even his full power strike could even injure it. The zombie roared. The zombie charged at Song-chan and bit one of his arms. The next moment, he let out a scream after getting bit by a zombie from behind. Maybe it would have gone differently with 3 people, but it was impossible to defeat 6 monsters with only 2. To die like this here. She did everything she could to survive until the 3rd tutorial. She just wanted to struggle a bit more and live. In the short moment, she was distracted by Song-chan. Ju-yeon gasped. One of the man-eating rats jumped, aiming for her face. At that moment, something flew through the air, popping the man-eating rat's body like a balloon. Ju-yeon was confused by the sudden turn of events. She was covered in the blood and flesh of the rat that exploded in front of her, but she had no time to find that unpleasant. She quickly turned her head towards the convenience store subconsciously. A can smashed through the glass window and hit a man-eating rat. The resulting impact made the can and the rat's head explode. The broken door opened. Don't be loud when someone's sleeping. From inside the store, a person stepped out. Now, I'm up all due to the noise. It was YuWon. Ju-yeon was speechless, unable to even voice her gratitude. She just stared blankly at the soda can that lay on the floor. Did he kill those monsters? With that? They were hard to kill even with a knife. And man-eating rats were so nimble, it was difficult to even get a clean attack on them up close. Yet YuWon defeated them just by throwing some cans around and cutting down the rest at a speed she couldn't even perceive. She knew that levels and stats were a thing that existed now, but that's actually possible? YuWon threw the other can in his hand. The zombie that was biting the man also ended up with its head blown off. The zombie falls down, with its blood spilling everywhere. That took care of the immediate threats. YuWon took out his sashimi knife and took his stance. In an instant, a moss spider and a man-eating rat got sliced in half under YuWon's knife. As one of the moss spiders charged at YuWon, he raised his foot. and the moss spider got crushed under YuWon's boot. Poison leaked out from the crushed moss spider and bubbled on the floor. It all happened in a flash. There were monster corpses scattered all around them. YuWon took a sigh of relief as he removed all the threats. YuWon looked back and forth between Hyun and Seongchan. Hyun pushed her amazement aside, as she realized that she still hadn't properly thanked the man for saving their lives. "Thank you? You saved us." The man tried to say his thanks, but in that instant, he felt an excruciating pain in his arm, so he let out a cry. The bite from the zombie must have been excruciatingly painful because Seongchan couldn't even properly finish his sentence. The man fell down on his knees as they tried to calm him down. YuWon rummaged around his inventory pouch. He pulled out an ointment and tossed it over to Seongchan. "First, put some of that on. It should be quite effective." "What's your constitution at?" YuWon asked the boy. "Right now. Should be 17. So you won't die then. You might not be able to use the arm that was bitten anymore, though." The boy got startled and said in a crumbling voice, "Say again?" "Rub it on right now. It might not be too late." Seongchan was shocked at being told he might not be able to use one of his arms anymore. He quickly applied the ointment to the bite. YuWon checks the time. There were about 23 hours remaining. A few hours had passed. "So I slept for about 6 hours, huh?" YuWon let out a big yawn. 6 hours was just enough time to relieve his fatigue. But unrelated to his fatigue, he felt the desire to sleep a little more. "I want to sleep more. I guess I did overdo it." 4 days. Perhaps he was a bit too overzealous about hunting. He had pushed himself a bit too far because he thought he had to level up as much as he could in the early tutorial stages, especially before the 3rd tutorial ended. YuWon was taking a short nap. No matter how your stats were, not sleeping for days built up fatigue, slowing your body down. Taking the 1st and 2nd tutorials into account, it was the first time in 4 days he had slept. He chose the storage room inside the subway station convenience store as his resting place. There was only one reason he was able to safely get some rest in a station full of monsters. It was thanks to the scentless powder. YuWon had bought it from the new lackey for 100 points. Scentless powder could completely erase the smell of whatever it was applied to, protecting it from monsters that had sharp senses. YuWon looked at the two of them and thought before leaving, "They will only get in my way." The two of them were afraid that YuWon might kill them to get their loot. As YuWon got ready to leave. Meanwhile, Hyun sighed in relief. "Have you been hunting here this entire time? Isn't the station pretty dangerous?" The subway station was an off-limits area for most people. Monsters appeared there more frequently, and though they rarely appeared, the subterranean snake was so dangerous, even a decent-sized group of participants would have a hard time against it. "I wasn't here the entire time." After hearing YuWon's response, Hyun made a face that said, "That's what I thought." The subway station was so infested with monsters, there was no way he had been there for long. YuWon continued talking. "This is just my rest area." "What? A rest area?" Hyun was shocked. YuWon stood back up. "My hunting ground is elsewhere." Hyun and Seongchan followed YuWon. He led them down a strange path. They had no memories of such a place inside Hongdae Station. The layout really did change, Hyun thought. Hongdae Station had become larger and deeper. She was certain the stairwell that she was walking down at that moment hadn't existed before. "We're going further in?" "The real hunting grounds start on basement level 2. Hyun was surprised. "There's a second level?" None of the people that went inside the station had returned, which is why YuWon was the only person that knew of the stairs that led deeper inside the station. "There really is another dungeon on the second level." Hyun gulped. While pulling out his weapons, YuWon asked them, "You guys knew it was dangerous, so why did you come here?" Hyun tightly gripped her weapon with both hands, answering his question with a quivering voice. "You might not know this because you've been in here since the start of the 3rd tutorial, but it's complete chaos out there. YuWon nodded his head. He already knew. That's because this isn't a video game. On the surface, it might seem like a simple hunting mission, but the third tutorial was far more complex than that. When hundreds of people are gathered for a simple objective like obtaining items by hunting, it creates a complex ecosystem. Groups formed, and people started distrusting each other. Right now, there are ongoing fights to rob each other for these tiny marbles, Hyun explained. So you guys ran here because you were being attacked? YuWon asked. Yes. I guess they didn't want to risk their lives since they gave up on chasing us once we entered here. Songchan explained. But you guys almost died here instead. We survived in the end. They were pretty much thinking of relying on YuWon. It was all thanks to you. As they finished talking, a sound echoed. It was a cry that Hyun and Songchan had never heard before. It made their bodies freeze up. What was that noise? However, YuWon was used to the cry. Showing no response, he instead turned his back to the source of the noise, looking at the two people. All thanks to me? Who's to say I won't kill you guys and steal your essence? YuWon's eyes were still without a shred of mercy. He wanted to test those too. As YuWon spoke, several thoughts flashed in their minds. We did not think of that because he saved us. Compared to the people above and the monsters here, he is far too dangerous. The two of them started backing away from YuWon. It was a terrifying thing to hear. Right now, YuWon was a much scarier enemy than any monster. Haven't you already collected enough essence? Songchan asked. YuWon nodded yes. He had already collected enough essence before the third tutorial even started. Then do you have any reason to kill us? I'm still collecting more essence. Besides, even if I don't kill you myself, you guys will die. And I don't think I have to explain the reason. It was the truth. If YuWon didn't help them now, they were destined to die without him having to lift a single finger. Hyun was sharp-minded. She quickly noticed that something was off. Why was someone who intends to kill us telling us everything? What exactly do you want from us? Hyun gathered her will and asked him. Hyun's question made YuWon smile. She was a pretty quick thinker. She knew that YuWon wouldn't have talked with them for as long as he did if didn't want anything from them. I promise it's not a bad deal. If you guys do a good job, I'll even give you guys some essence. Their faces lit up from his offer. They would have been content leaving the station in one piece. But now they were being offered essence. They had to gather 50 essences within one day, so this was an irresistible offer for the two of them. That's all for today. If you like the next part of this manhwa, just comment below. Thanks for watching, and please don't forget to like, subscribe and comment for getting epic content on this channel. See you next time.